Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh, joined by Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy. Admiral, welcome back from your duties of senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. I'm coming at you with a curve from left field. I forgot to write you a note about this. I've been listening to a book by Andrew Roberts called Masters and Commanders, which I was unaware that he'd written. And it's a lot about Sir Alan Robbins being a strategist, as he likes to say, and not thinking that George Marshall was. And Alan Roberts is a pretty impressive man in my view. Have you read that book? Are you familiar with him?
I'm familiar with the book, yes.
Okay. So, who is our strategist on China? Who is actually sitting around thinking about how to deter China from doing stupid things?
I think in the absence of anyone else, it's probably Admiral Sam Paparo at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. The problem, of course, is he's also our operationalist, thinking about how you actually defeat China if you're forced to fight them. And it is not a good strategy to have your strategist be your lead warfighter, because those are conflicting responsibilities. And so the real answer to your question is we don't have someone in that role, and we haven't for quite some time.
So, where would that person be? Would they be at the White House? Would it be Bridge Colby if he goes to be undersecretary, as I hope? Would it be Mike Waltz, who's also operational? I really don't know where we would have one stored.
So, in theory, I mean, there's a few places it could be. One could be, if our chairman, the Joint Chiefs, stood back from the kind of day-to-day operational role that they have inserted themselves into over the years. In theory, it could be there. We had a civilian, Andy Marshall, who
Oh, yeah.
thought deep thoughts, but I'm not sure. He was a strategist. Sorry about the language. He was our chief strategist in the most esoteric sense of the word, not kind of in the tell me how we confront China broadly, which is I think what you're getting at. And so probably, I mean, the chairman is one position could be the Bridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Again, he will be sucked into, what do we do about Iran? What do we do about Somalia? What do we do about Kosovo? Very quickly. So I don't think that job can do it either. We're not aligned for that. But honestly, if the chairman were doing the job, kind of as construed in the Goldwater-Nichols law, there might be a role for him or her in that.
Okay, off the top of your head, I know you're just back from Taiwan again, and we had China circling Australia with its war game. Let me play for you, by the way. President Trump this morning on Air Force One talking about China playing games with Australia, cut number 21.
China and Iran are doing military exercises together. Does that concern you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Why not?
Because we're stronger than all of them. We have more power than all of them. I rebuilt the military. Unfortunately, Biden did nothing with it, but I rebuilt the military. But we don't want to even talk about that. I think if you look at what's happening and if you see what we've done and if you see where we've come, and let's see what happens with the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. I think you're going to have eventually, and maybe not in the distant future, you're going to have some.
So what is he
results.
saying there, Admiral, about China and Iran running their war games and China circling, and he's not concerned about it? What's he trying to communicate to them?
So first, two things are going on. One, China, Russia, and Iran are actually doing multilateral exercises in the Arabian Gulf area. And he's right to say, look, that, it bothers me that the Axis authoritarians are getting together. China and Russia are starting to do more complex exercises. But when you include the Iranians, it quickly goes down to the lowest common denominator. So that exercise in and of itself doesn't bother me. Separately, China is circumventing Australia with a cruiser, a frigate, and a replenishment ship, and kind of a show of force and a demonstration of we're a big country, you're a small or medium-sized country to Australia. I don't think Australia buys it. They're doing it for the second time in a row around a federal election in Australia. Again, I don't think that affects the Australian voter in a way that the Chairman Xi might want. But it is a demonstration of power. Now, to get at his third point, which is we are the preeminent naval power in the world, but more than that, we're the preeminent joint power. Because if I'm going to sink a Chinese Navy, I'm not going to do it with Navy ships necessarily. I could do it with Air Force bombers just as efficiently, and maybe even with land-based missiles from the Army or Marine Corps. So there are a lot of options for us. He's correct to say we're still there. And one last point, he did rebuild our military. Our military dropped to 3% spending on GDP under President Obama. He raised it up to about 3.4%. It's come back down to 3%. Unfortunately, he now needs to build it back up about 0.1% a year, and I think that's what Chairman Wicker, Senator Wicker of the Senate Armed Services Committee, is intending to do.
Now, from the strategist point of view, is it a good thing or a bad thing for Taiwan Semiconductor to build a lot of their chips here in the United States?
This was fantastic, Hugh. Look, Taiwan's president can't come to America because of the restrictions we have. Their vice president can't come. The minister of defense can't come. The minister of foreign affairs can't come. The TSMC leader was effectively the manifestation of Taiwan's leader to meet with the president. I loved it. Look, it's like the prime minister of Japan when he came and promised, several hundred billion. That added up to $1 trillion total, but really several hundred billion worth of increased Japanese investments and potentially a solution to the Nippon Steel, U.S. Steel investment issue. But the TSMC chair coming and giving this $100 billion increased investment on top of their already existing $65 billion investment over the next 4 years in a number of sites around the country, at least 5 different facilities. This was Taiwan saying, we're in it with you. We are your economic partner of choice. We are critical to your economy. You are critical to our economy. We are bound to each other in a way that I just can't tell you how impressed I was with Taiwan for doing this and with TSMC for taking the lead.
All right, now, Admiral, last question. We may go into the break on this. Does China have smart strategists, to borrow again from Field Marshal Brooke, we call strategists? Do they have good ones? Because they're moving a lot of people around sort of randomly and quickly.
So I think they did after the third Taiwan Straits crisis back in 1994-95, when we put 2 carriers around Taiwan and basically made them back down. They had a strategic insight of a great proportion, in the sense that they said, we're going to take the next 25 years and build a military that doesn't let this happen again, and drive the United States Navy and Air Force from outside the first island chain. That was a strategic moment, and then they spent 25 years operationally executing it.
So now, well, let's go to the break. I'm going to ask you when we come back, and I'll put this over on our YouTube and I'll play it tomorrow. How do we counter that? And what's the strategic insight or breakthrough that we need to actually operationalize over 25 years? I think I know the answer from Tom Cotton's book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China, but I'll find out from Admiral Montgomery right after this. I'm back with Admiral Mark Montgomery. Admiral, what is the strategic insight the United States has to grasp and then operationalize to match what the Chinese have done for the last 25 years?
So I think the most important thing we have to do, Hugh, is we have to make it so that Taiwan and the United States, our forces together are 2 + 2 = 5. In other words, the sum of our parts is greater than the individual value. And that is going to be hard, because right now, the sum of our parts is 2 + 2 = 3. We are 2 deconflicted militaries not ready to operate together. Look, we need to continue investments in our military. I think Sam Paparo's got that figured out. I think with the right budget levels, Senator Wicker and Chairman Rogers in the House will make sure that happens to support the president. And Taiwan needs to make investments, and they are geared in. They told me point blank, we are all in on 3% in GDP, and they'll go higher. We can talk some other time about why 10% is not realistic, because we can't sell them those weapons. But the thing we can change, and change with minimal cost but amazing return, is a strategic commitment to aligning our militaries, exercising together, planning together, naval exercises, air exercises, then joint exercises, air exercises with ground exercises, then joint exercises. If we can do that, we can make 2 + 2 = 5. And the one country that's going to know it more than any other is China. And the CCP will be deterred if they see that 2 + 2 = 5 when the Taiwan and the United States get together to fight.
How hard is that to make happen, Admiral?
So when I was in the Senate working for Senator McCain, we would say every year, do these exercises, do that, do that. You should do this, you should do that. And the Department of Defense blew us off because it was never an order. Then with the Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act, for which Senator Cotton deserves a lot of credit, as does Senator Menendez and others, I wrote sections of it that explicitly said, you must exercise with them. You must do joint exercises, service exercises, joint exercises. You must plan with them. You must provide FMF. You must provide Presidential Drawdown Authority. You must prioritize them in sales, so when they want to buy things, they get near the top of the list. All those musts from Congress were passed in the Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act, and the fiscal year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act. Since then, we've seen some efforts by Sam Paparo at Indo-PACOM to start to operationalize that. Congress needs to lean into the Department of Defense. Tell President Trump's team, you have to operationalize this.
Well said. Admiral Montgomery, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for returning. Come back next week or soon thereafter. Thank you, Admiral.